Welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I'm here at the News Forum where all voices matter. I'd like to welcome Geoffrey Turner for the first time to Boom and Bust. Geoffrey is a senior counsel at Davies Law Firm, and he's also a professor of law. He'll be talking to us today about the need for tax reform in this country. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tony. Always happy to talk about tax policy.
Well, I'm glad that you are because as we'll get into, it is very important for Canadians across the country. So I guess we'll start right at the beginning. You're saying that Canada is in dire need of tax overhaul. So what do you mean by that?
Well, the problem is, Canada has many economic problems, and in particular, stagnant productivity, right? Like our workers working are with inadequate capital. The income is inadequate compared to the potential. And part of the problem is our tax system, which unfortunately is not nearly as competitive as it should be. It's too much discouraging business investment, which is exactly what we need to nurture our productivity growth and our income growth. And so I think that there is a pretty large role for tax reform to play to make our tax system more competitive, more friendly to business investment, and to help as part of the overall strategy to, raise our prosperity and just have a more vigorous economy.
How did we get to this place? Presumably, this is not something that happened overnight. So give us a little bit of a history lesson on where tax policy went wrong.
Well, I guess I'd have to take us back then to the original fundamental principles underlying the design of our tax system. And traditionally, we try to achieve these competing objectives of equity, neutrality, and simplicity. And by that, we mean equity looks at the fairness of the tax system. Is the tax burden appropriately distributed amongst the tax-paying public? And the current government has definitely prioritized that as one of the competing attributes. And as we can see, we'll talk about in a bit, many of the tax policies have been very focused on enhancing, their particular version of equity. But the other two competing principles are equally important and I would argue have been largely neglected. And those are the principles of neutrality and of simplicity. And when we talk about neutrality in our tax system, we're talking about the aspirational goal that taxes should minimize distortions, minimize interference with decisions that market participants make as they engage in transactions. And an ideal tax system would distort decisions and behavior as little as possible. Acknowledge that that's not always going to be attainable, and any taxes will always influence behavior. But that the goal should be to try to minimize those distortions. And then, of course, the third competing attribute or goal is that of simplicity, and that wraps in a whole lot of concepts. So when we talk about how costly is it for people to comply, we have a self-assessment system. We need taxpayers to be capable of understanding what their obligations are. We need the CRA to be capable of administering the tax system without undue cost burdens. And we need systems that are capable of adjudicating those disputes. All of that compliance work is more costly when our tax system is more complex. And so it's desirable, it's undeniably desirable to have as simple a system as possible. And so my contention is that maybe we've gone too far in focusing on equity principles in designing our taxes, and we've maybe neglected those other principles of neutrality and simplicity.
So let's unpack that a little bit further. Are you saying that the Trudeau government has been too activist in the equity area? Is that part of what the problem is?
That is my contention. Now, again, I do think we have to acknowledge that governments of all stripes, including past conservative governments, have indeed used our tax system to achieve behavioral goals, whatever they may have been. And so we've had a longstanding acceptance, for example, of the scientific research and experimental development credit system, to nurture that type of spending by businesses into, scientific research to develop intellectual property and so on. Other taxes are they're designed to address market imperfections or
Right.
market failures. So think of the excise taxes on.
I'm going to stop you right there. Hold that thought. We are going to go to commercial break, but we'll be right back with your other thoughts and other questions. Please stay with us.